Okay, I'm on my AirPods. Does that sound remarkably worse?
Yes.
Do we need to do an official intro on this thing, like people have been asking, or do we just have we already done it?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Bonsai Wire podcast. Today, Andrew Robson and I are going to be talking about what we thought of the past year in bonsai and what we're looking forward to in the coming year for bonsai. We're both very excited about a lot of things next year, but there are a few things to feel good about this past year. And I know, Andrew, you have had insanely exciting progress on your garden, for instance.
Yeah, my garden this time last year, I had a greenhouse and gravel, and that was that was about it. So now I have benches, I have shade cloth, I have a lot of landscape plants, so and I have a lot of trees, and so that's all pretty exciting. It was a really busy year, but it was really good. It's really the first year of the garden, and so it's been fun to watch it kind of evolve and progress.
On that note, it's kind of funny to mention you have benches. How many of your trees are on benches right now?
There's currently no trees on benches if we're talking about places outside of the greenhouse. The greenhouse has a few benches, and that's pretty packed full, both on the bench and off the bench. And I have some things in the studio because we've had some cold weather here in Portland. But outside the benches are totally empty. We were thankfully able to leave them up until right around Christmas this year, which is pretty long. Usually we take down around Thanksgiving. But we got a few extra weeks of trees on the benches, which is always nice. It's always, when we put things away for winter, it's always like the most depressing time in a bonsai garden for me, to just look out and see the benches like totally empty. And so it's fun to go in a greenhouse. They're all packed together and you get to see a lot of stuff in a short amount of space, which is fun. But I do miss things on the benches.
You'd also mentioned a couple of weeks ago, Andrew visited my garden and he was noticing the stark difference between a primarily conifer garden to a primarily deciduous garden, and how full of life gardens can actually look this time of year.
Yeah, it's super. There are a few interesting contrasts between our two places. My yard is relatively large and spread out, and while that can be nice and it gives the trees some space, I do feel there's something more relevant about bonsai when they're in a really tight space. It makes them feel, I don't know, it makes them feel more present or something like that. And I even think bonsai in an urban environment, in Alameda, you're much more urban than I am, kind of here in the suburbs of Portland. And that also, you could walk out and have city, 10 feet away from your bonsai. And I think, I don't know, I like those things. So it's fun to get out and see different gardens because you pick up a lot of different things.
It's an interesting word you used, relevant in a smaller garden. And that really calls to mind that in general, bonsai suggests larger forms, whether they're perfect miniaturizations or just small representations of some of the more grand designs or patterns we see in nature. And it's funny that that idea pops up when thinking about bonsai in a small space, let alone an urban space, is it offers more of that suggestion of something else, and how appropriate to have that suggestion when you are surrounded by block after block of houses.
Yeah. Yeah, it gives, I don't know, it gives you a little portal to a wild place when you're in a really busy kind of urban environment, which is nice. So
Very well manicured wild place.
yeah, yeah. Here where I am, I'm in the suburbs of Portland. We have a lot of old trees around me. I'm surrounded by like 100-year-old oak trees, and so it's like you see an old bonsai on a bench, and then you see an old oak tree, and it's not that stark contrast as like a city kind of life to a
Well,
to a
it's funny.
bonsai.
We have a lot of 100-plus-year-old oak trees in Alameda as well, but they're live oaks. And so they have a much different form, and the trees are a lot shorter. So it doesn't feel like you're driving through, country as much as it's everything's on kind of a smaller, more compact scale with those trees.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and so you've had some construction this year too. We can hear some of that right now. But
Yeah, I'm a year behind you. No, actually, yeah, a little more than a year behind you in
yeah,
the construction. But yeah, adding a basement to the house. So this has been an interesting winter in that there'll be the bedroom is now the living room, and I have no heat all winter long. So I'm
oh
getting
boy.
really used to wearing coats indoors this winter.
Yeah, yeah. You're getting some Portland or some Northwest kind of weather down there. Um,
Exactly. And so it's making me really excited about the coming year, because I think this coming year will be, it's one of the most, I mean, I've been doing bonsai almost 30 years now, and I think this will be one of the more interesting, exciting, and challenging years of all of them. Just
Why is
because
that?
there's a lot of stuff going on. I'm just living through a big construction project is just a big demand on time. And so that makes time in the garden that much more precious. And so it'll be really exciting. A big reason why I'm doing this work is really to facilitate classes at the house, and as well as the rest of the business. And so I'll have a lot more space to do things that I want to do downstairs, which will be great. So that's exciting to know that I feel like we're setting ourselves up for the future. There's big changes in my garden as well. And we've got, of course, the Pacific Bonsai Expo coming up. And that has been surprisingly, there's a lot of details that we've got to cover for that. Just this week, I've been talking to the county about requirements for out-of-state vendors and out-of-state exhibitors. So Eric and I are now putting together a kind of a chart that will give people an idea of what species are and aren't allowed, or what kind of paperwork will be required, paperwork and or treatments, depending on the species.
Interesting. Did any species stick out on that?
You know, I don't have it off the top of my head. In general, most everything will be allowed. Most everything will require a phytosanitary certificate. So we're just going to encourage everyone to get a phytosanitary certificate. So call up the county, have someone come and inspect the plant, and then get that paperwork. And that'll be the best document for getting things into the state.
Great.
Under the pine section, there was one thing that was a big surprise. There are a lot of limitations, or at least a handful of limitations, on which pines can come into California. But in the state code, there's literally an exemption for bonsai pine.
Interesting.
I couldn't have made that up. I was really happy to see it. I think
Yeah.
the exempt species, you get up to 3 exemptions per person, something like that.
That's great.
Yeah. So nothing really stood out. You know, they're more concerned about fruiting and flowering trees. I think almonds might be forbidden. It's, you know, it's that kind of thing, but we're in the middle of putting that together. They list everything by pathogen or pest, and we want to list it all by species, because we don't want to see the same tree on 10 lists. We just want to see one list. What do you have to do for species X, Y, or Z, depending on what state you're coming from.
Yeah. And we'll probably do a whole podcast, and you'll do blog posts and whatnot about that. So that'll be fun to learn, because it is a little bit of a hurdle to get a tree into California.
It is. And I've experienced that every time I take trees out of California. I have to go through this exact process when I come back. So every time I have vended out of state, whether in Oregon, Washington, New York, and altogether, I've done that plenty of times. It's the exact same process I've always gone through. So I'm used to it, and I know that there's a workable system for that, which is nice.
Yeah, great.
But it's just part of the puzzle of the overall excitement for this year. I'm kind of letting all of these big events be kind of a transition for everything I'm doing in bonsai, both for the types of classes I teach, for the kind of trees I have in the garden, and for really how I want to spend my time for the next couple of years, at least the coming year.
Yeah. So what does that look like? I mean, besides the crazy construction, what's going on at your place bonsai wise right now?
So Andrew came down, for those of you who don't know, and visited the garden a month ago, something like that. And I told him something funny as we were talking about the garden. I said, I'm really good at letting someone else be an excuse to tell me something I already know, but I'll let them be the excuse to actually do it. And so Andrew said, well, if you don't have time to work on your best trees, what are you doing with all those other trees in the garden? And I said, yeah, good point. I ask myself that all the time. And so I let that be an excuse to start radically reducing the trees in the backyard. And I think I've already moved probably 300 to 400 young trees out of the garden, 150 pots out of the garden, and maybe half a dozen to a dozen, more like a dozen bonsai and pre-bonsai.
Wow.
And that's literally just in the last 3-4 weeks.
Yeah. So I'm sure, do you think if I came today, it would look different than when I was there a month ago?
It would look night and day different, for one simple reason, that when you showed up, I hadn't weeded in a month, and all the spent fertilizer bags were on every tree. So I think within days of you leaving, I'd cleaned up most of the weeds, every single fertilizer bag, and just rearranged all the plants on the tables. So all the smaller, younger sale items are all in the same spot. So yeah, I'd say the garden looks radically different than when you were here. And it'll
And
hopefully look just as different 3-4 weeks from now.
okay. And
Like,
are you still kind of moving with it, or are you like, this is good, I'm done?
oh, every
Like,
step in
where are
this
you in the
direction
process?
feels, oh, every step feels like a huge victory.
Yeah.
It's like if I can liberate bench space, it's like yay. And my
You're
goal
kind of
is
like, you're Marie Kondoing your collection.
I'm pretty
You're
much looking for what sparks joy in the garden. That's right.
yeah, yeah.
Which
Which
is
is
funny because I asked myself that years ago when I was cleaning out a lot of stuff in the house. And I thought, boy, it'd be a very interesting process to do with your trees to see which trees feel good, because a lot of your
yeah,
favorite trees are often the ones with health problems or they're a hassle to work on, but you
sure.
love them anyway. And so it's a fun puzzle to figure out.
Yeah, that brings up, an interesting point. Do we work? There's two different approaches that you could take when working on a collection. You could work on your worst trees first, with the hopes and maybe the logic of they hopefully get caught up to be, not the worst trees anymore.
Mhm.
But I found most people who have success in shows and having nice collections and whatnot, they always start from the top and work down.
Yep.
Um, and that's how I've been working, and it's I don't know, I like that method a lot more.
I can't say
Um,
anything bad about that. I think for many years, I was running a garden aspirationally rather than practically, meaning I'm very happy with all the trees I have in the garden. I have nowhere near the time that it would take to get those trees where I want. And I think what had been changing really ever since I started the construction project 6, 7 months ago is I was realizing that you can only tread water for so long with trees. If you go too long without thinning and wiring trees, the
yeah.
branches develop into far less pleasant forms. And I want to not continue going down that path. So it feels like more of a make or break time for a lot of trees. It's like, okay, yeah, the cart is up on two wheels where it's either going to go totally off the rails and maybe off a cliff, or we're going to get it back so all four wheels are on the ground and we can roll out from there.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah. Fun.
the bigger question is, have I actually made time for trees yet? A little bit, but I will say the one pine I pulled out off the shelf to start working on is one of the better pines in the garden. So I am
Oh, good.
starting
Oh, good.
on that hypothesis.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. I've been doing a lot of work here. The nice thing about living in Portland is that because we're so mild, we don't. I mean, we do have a little cold stretch right now, but typically we're a pretty mild climate that we can typically work on deciduous trees all throughout the wintertime,
Oh, great.
and do some wiring as long as we protect them in the greenhouse, maybe afterwards. So I've been working on this huge surplus of Telperion plants that I got into the garden last year after they had their tragic fire. I brought in about maybe 50, 60 trees from them. And a lot of them were huge things that I had cut back really hard and kind of let them regrow throughout the growing season. And now they're kind of ready for their first kind of structural setting of work. And so I've been working on all of those recently. I do one or two a day. And it's really, really cool. It's like I feel like I'm making a bonsai like
Yes.
every single day.
Yeah.
And that's been really rewarding. I'm also taking another approach where I'm doing it more for me. I'm not photographing what I'm doing. I'm not documenting it too much, even though I should be from a business sense. But it's just really nice to just come into the studio, work on a tree, have it be kind of just for me, and then it goes back out in the garden. I've been really enjoying that.
It's funny, I feel the exact same way since I have been known to document a little bit of my work over the years.
Yeah.
And it's nice to just leave. And it's funny, it just keeps getting worse and worse. I spend more and more time doing that. But no, it feels great. You just pick something up, you do the work, you put it back on the bench and
Yeah.
smile. And it's like Sisyphus, you smile on your way down the mountain when you're waiting
Yep.
to start pushing the next one up the hill again.
Yeah.
So my one big question for you about doing that work is you've got a lot of large trunks with tons of healthy new shoots on it. And I'm wondering, how much are you going to focus on creating indeterminate structure, that branches that are thick enough to help you transition from the large core structure that you're starting with and the fine things you're going to end up with. Because I know a lot of people just like doing that detail work right off the big trunks, but you've got a lot of literally 3 to 4 inch trunk and branch. Are you looking to build some 2 inch sections next?
I am, but I'm treating them as if they're small things now. And
Oh, interesting.
what I mean by that is, first of all, with deciduous, the only thing that I really like to wire is growth that's 1 year old, kind of max,
Yep.
from the previous growing season. Anything larger than that is just a risk to wire it. So I like to cut things back in the growing season, let them regrow, and then I wire that regrowth. And so that's what I'm doing on all these trees now. Because most of them are just trunks, they weren't worked very much when they were in the ground. They're almost more Yamadori than they are field grown bonsai.
Yeah.
That's how I kind of see them and treat them. Um, I'm wiring a lot of structure right now that's, the size of a pencil or smaller. But I fully expect that to grow to be, thumb size or thicker, so that I build some nice transition off the trunk. So the plan is I'm wiring a lot of structure right now. I'm going to let the plants run for a few years so that structure can
Great.
really thicken up. And then I'm probably going to do a similar process again in a couple of years.
Great. That's something I've not seen much of. A lot of people feel that when they buy a trunk, that the development work is done and they can immediately switch gears to refinement. But when you don't have that primary structure and it's not going to be there accidentally, like that's just nature is not going to
Yeah.
do that wherever you get the tree.
Yeah, yeah. And the work that's been really inspiring to me lately is the work that comes out of Croatia, because
Yeah.
from Maria Haddock and the person who runs And Bonsai, both of those artists. They've been working on horn beams, and you can see that they're as rough as mine look when I dug them from Telperion, and you can kind of they did a good job documenting the progress, and you can see, oh, this is what it looked like when they first wired those little tiny things. 5 years later, those little tiny things have a lot more structure. So it's cool to kind of see a roadmap that's already kind of laid out.
It's hugely inspirational for me because I guess I really am not as much a fan of going from huge things to little tiny things. When people take the time to develop that core structure of the tree, that's what we grow bonsai for. And it takes a little bit of discipline to let something look rangy for a few years. But I think her
Yeah.
trees are a fantastic example of that, because you can go back to those older photos and see, oh, this is what they started with, and this is how they got to something that's definitely more complete. And I think the more we can kind of show that process or give people tangible, object lessons and how that can work, that the more we'll start seeing of that.
Yeah, that's one of my biggest complaints with most deciduous bonsai that I see is that you have a big trunk and then you have little tiny things coming off of that. And there's no transition to taper from
Right.
trunk to primary branch to secondary branch to tertiary branch to all the way to the fine twigs. Um, and I see so many bonsai like that, and with these I'm being really intentional about, I did this big cut back, I'm wiring some structure. Okay, now the structure needs to transition a little bit. Otherwise, it looks unnatural,
Yeah.
right?
You also said something in there that actually triggered a thought I hadn't had, which makes me feel silly for not thinking of this sooner. But you mentioned I'm treating the Telperian trees like collected trees. And
Yeah.
that brings up an interesting topic. So in general, what do we appreciate about pines, the bark? What do we appreciate about junipers, twisting movement in deadwood? And we forgive a lot of what we might call, in quotes, flaws if the trees have these spectacular characteristics. Now, we don't tend to see that same forgiveness of basic core features in deciduous trees, but because most of the deciduous trees we see in Japan are air layers or have been cultivated from scratch over just 40, 50 years in many cases for the great trees. I wonder, is there room for thinking of deciduous trees wherever they came from as collected to the degree that we're going to forgive really obvious flaws, no taper, angular branches, super awkward shapes and forms, because they have other characteristics, and those characteristics really can only be bark and sheer size. And so I never thought of that. Are we opening up the door for kind of a new world of, or a new aesthetic for deciduous trees that's much more forgiving?
I think we are, and I think actually a lot of that credit goes to Walter Paul and his students in Croatia, who have kind of said, you know what, this isn't a perfect scarless trunk, but it's an unusual one, and it's one that really stands out. It's one that you would remember. It's something that's not. it's atypical of what we usually see. And that's, if we think about Japanese bonsai, the trees that get named are the Yamadori that have these crazy forms that look unlike anything else. And if you don't really see a lot of named Japanese maples or beech or something like that, because a lot of them look like the next ones. And that's fine. That's impressive. That's hard work to be able to achieve. But I think the interesting thing about the work that's being done in Croatia right now with the hornbeams, with some of their native prunus species, with pistache and other plants, is that they do, even though they're deciduous or broadleaf plants, they are taking on that individuality that conifer Yamadori typically have, at least the best ones.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
so I think that's been really inspiring. 5 years ago, I'm not sure I would have been impressed with a lot of those trees, but as I do deciduous bonsai more and more, I like the trees that are. I like the contrast that the more gnarly Yamadori feeling trees give to the more perfect pot grown trees. I like that contrast. I have both in my garden, and I think there's definitely a place for both.
I was just thinking, I'd love to see a slideshow that you put together where you take some of these, whether Japanese or European deciduous trees that are full, rich, wonderful examples, and then maybe draw in dotted lines where here were the original cuts where there was an original big branch, and then draw in the squiggles and just kind of overlay, here's what this tree looked like after its first wiring, and here's what it looks like now, just as kind of a visual cue for people to start thinking through, how do you get from A to Z?
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually one of my goals for next month is to bring, if I have the energy for it, bring every single tree that I have in against a white wall and photograph it.
Nice.
So I can start getting kind of yearly report cards on some of these trees. I probably should have done that when I dug these out of the field and they were, 12 feet tall, something like that, before I did the hard cut back. But I think it's helpful for people.
Important. Yeah, I think this is a perfect spot because you want to get a baseline. And I forgive that first year because the job was getting them A, out of the ground, and B, healthy pretty much. And so now you've got roots, they're growing. And so now we'll hold the work against you,
Okay, good. Yeah.
Meaning
I'll do everything. I'll try and do everything that I've been excited about not doing, which is documenting the work for people to see.
But like you say, you've got a little bit of time to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that'll be fun.
But yeah, and so I'm excited to see where a lot of these trees go. Something I'm looking forward to this year is I'm doing a lot of repotting, which is why I came down to see you to round up some soil and some supplies. I have a lot of things going into pots that are in big plastic pots right now. And to be able to, take something, wire it up, put it into a big plastic, or put it into a nice bonsai pot. I'm getting a lot of pots from now, Tokutake, which I'm excited about. I think it's going to be fun to see, actual bonsai being created here, which is fun.
It makes the garden look so much better.
Yeah. So
and theoretically, it'll help you keep the foot on the brake a little bit, which will be nice, and you won't have ideally as crazy growth.
Yeah. Which that's I do advocate for boxes and Anderson flats and whatnot for a lot of people, but if you come to my yard, you see a lot of things in pots. One, because it looks nice, but two, because it slows things down, which is when you have 250 trees, it's nice that they're not at full speed.
Do you have any trees how many long-term projects do you have in the garden right now? Like young things that you're developing?
I have, I would call a lot of these Stelperion trees that I have long-term projects, even though they'll start to look nice in 5 or 10 years.
Meaning, do you have any trees on the property where you're still thickening trunks? You're still growing trunks?
Not many.
Because I thought you had a handful, like literally a handful, maybe.
I have a handful. I have some chochabai that are starting to develop some structure, things that I've grown from cuttings. I'm developing some shohin right now because I'm so passionate about big trees that I've been kind of neglecting smaller trees in the collection. And rather than buy those, I've decided just to grow them since it doesn't take as long.
Nice.
I have a few things, but I'm trying to phase out a lot of that work so that when people come here, they see mostly at least a trunk.
Exactly. And that's kind of why I brought it up, is to kind of point out that you're going to be kind of the perfect baseline starting point for what this kind of work looks like. Oh, you're starting with this shape, with that form, with this shape, with that form. Here's
Mhm.
how you proceed from there. Because we haven't seen a lot of that over the years, particularly with deciduous trees. There have always been a handful of people that have taken an absurd long time doing that work. But I think with as much as you have, we're going to have all kinds of examples of those stages.
Yeah, I'm really aiming for the garden to be like a deciduous playground for people, so they can see these crazy, unique Yamadori-looking deciduous trees like they see from Croatia online. They can see imported Japanese trees. They can see trees that have been grown in a seedling versus field grown versus whatever, in all different forms. Some that look like bonsai, some that actually look like trees. So I'm trying to build a very broad collection. One, because that's what I like, but two, so people can get a good feel for a lot of the different options out there.
And in terms of your relationship with these trees, are there any trees you feel like you're developing just for the point of selling, or are you developing all of them as members of your collection and the future will bring what it brings?
All of them for members of my collection. Yeah,
Uh,
my business portfolio does not really include tree selling. I'll do it for clients and whatnot, and sometimes I have a tree that's not exciting anymore, like most of us, and I'll pass that along. But I
so
don't
you
know. I,
think
I
that,
I don't take much enjoyment out of that.
yeah, and that's another reason I want to bring that up. It's an interesting way to think about it, especially as you are going to have people coming through your garden for classes and whatnot. And so 10 years from now, do you think you'll have 80% of these trees on site, 70%, 90%? What do you think?
I think that the trees that I have here right now, I think a good 80% of them will still be here in 30 years.
30 years. That's a
Yeah, yeah.
we'll have to
Well,
update.
we'll reassess, but
I don't know what the new podcast technology will be 30 years from now, but we'll provide an
yeah,
update for that. That'll be
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. It'll be like virtual or something. But
Exactly.
yeah. What about you? What do you like looking at your collection? What do you think is long term? What are you going to have in the next 10 years? What percentage of your trees?
Well, so that gets back to the whole transition and where
I
I
guess that's
kind
kind of
of
hard to
plan
answer
from,
right
yeah,
now.
because I'm in the middle of kind of deciding where I'd like to land. In terms of what percentage of the current garden do I think I'll have even 10 years out? Pretty small percentage. Actually, the two of us walked through the garden recently, and what did we identify? At most 50 trees that would stay in the collection,
Hmm.
maybe 20 pines and a mix of 30 other trees or something like
Yeah,
that, give or
yeah.
take. And so, and even of those, I'd only imagine hanging on to maybe 25 to 35 of those that I'd expect to hang on to. Probably some of the young trees I will have developed into something by then, and I assume that I'd want to hang on to at least a handful of those. But I'm guessing that I haven't really set a target for what the portfolio, you could say, will
Yeah.
be 10 years from now. But I'd guess a considerable chunk might not be in the garden yet.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I
Yeah.
think of just where the good trees come from, they're often in private collections or trees that move around. And
Yeah.
then I just happen to have a disproportionate number of trees that I've developed over very long periods of time, whether from scratch or from trunks that I bought 15, 25 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, the Artisans Cup was really interesting for me because that was the show that kind of made me take a hard look at my collection. I wasn't a
Ah,
bonsai professional then. I don't even think I had any trees worth showing at that point in time. That was before my apprenticeship with Michael. But when I went to the Artisans Cup, I said, I don't have any trees that can be in this show. And what would a collection look like where every single tree in the collection could get into a show? Like, what if that was the bar?
right.
And so that's kind of been my mindset ever since then, is if I'm going to buy something, it has to have that type of long-term significance. Now I've gotten batches of young trees here and there just to have species that I don't have or have things for students or whatnot. But mostly when I'm purchasing trees, that's the baseline. Is could it get into the best venues for bonsai these days? Um, and it's hard because you look for 10 months before you find a tree that you want to buy, and I'm not sure a sustainable goal, but it's kind of interesting.
It is. A lot of people ask, well, why do you have this tree? Or why do you have that tree? It's got this flower, that flower. And I think, well, I've bought the best trees available to me when I had those opportunities. And so,
Yeah.
yes, it's a reflection of the kind of characteristics that I look for, but much, much more, it's a reflection of just what I found available, over being the many years of being a hobbyist in the San Francisco Bay Area. Just whatever's available, that's what you have to choose from. Now, some
Yeah.
people go way more out of their way to actually search out specific species and styles, and I haven't done that. Like, a lot of people are combing the internet constantly for who has one of these, who has one of those. I mean, people email me all the time looking for specific things, and I say, "Ooh, good question. Yeah, everyone's looking for a small deciduous right now, or whatever it happens to be."
Yeah. You can't be specific when you're looking for good trees. You almost just have to have it be as broad as and vague as possible. Like, I'm looking for a good tree, and that's it. Because whatever you're actually looking for is probably not. You're probably going to be a while before you actually find it. So if you
That's
have
right.
if your bar is quality versus species or size or something like
Yep.
that, then it might surprise you. Maybe you're looking for a Japanese maple and you come across a crepe myrtle that
Yeah.
is just ridiculous, and you kind of just have to go with what's in front of you. So that's a good point.
Yeah, it's funny how that works when you set a target of what would it look like, or what would the whole journey look like to have a garden where everything could get into an artisan's cup. It's actually not that hard to take steps in that direction once you identify that as the goal, because then immediately you have a reason to just wipe away every single activity that doesn't orient toward that goal. And that's, to me, a very optimistic thing, because if you have the resources, it's a shopping adventure. If you don't have the resources, it's a time adventure.
Yeah,
And
and it's almost like hunting too. Like it's or
yeah,
if you're like antiquing or things like that. I mean, it's the search for these things, because you can't just, so we're not in Japan. You can't just go to Morimi
right.
and just like buy one off the
Pay
shelf.
retail, yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like an adventure to find a special tree, and I almost enjoy that more than anything else.
Yeah, we talked about that at the US National Show this year, where right off the bat, it's like, okay, everyone wants to get into that vendor area immediately and
Yeah.
find out what is available. We don't care what it looks like now, but at some point between today and the next 10 years from now, it needs to be getting close to a high quality show tree to become compelling.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the fun thing about deciduous and I guess even with conifers too. But you don't always have to buy something that's ready right now, as long as it has the bones and the characteristics and features to be nice in the future.
That's right. I know some people that do that by species too. A lot of people who are interested in collecting specific cultivars, say of Japanese maple. And so if the specific cultivar is important, then usually your criteria becomes much more generous in terms of your starting points, but because you really want that spring color or that fall color, or whatever that leaf characteristic happens to be, or the bark maybe. And
Yeah,
that's why there's a premium often on those cultivars for the people who appreciate those things.
yeah. Fun. Well, what else is planned for 2022? We have the Bonsai Expo. You have construction happening and kind of collection revamp going on. I have a lot of young trees that are being kind of transformed into bonsai. What else is on the docket for
Well,
next year?
I think both of us are looking to change at least slightly our teaching models
Hmm.
in terms of the classes being offered at the garden. And I know you in particular are looking for a radical new direction in terms of the course offerings.
Yeah, I'm starting my classes next year. They are deciduous classes, so I mean, it kind of makes sense. My garden is 95% deciduous, and so I'm teaching deciduous classes. If you want to learn about maples and see 30 or 40 or 50 examples of them, if you want to learn beech or anything like that, that's kind of what my classes are aimed at. And I have a few different approaches. If you just want to come for a half day and work on your trees, I have that option available. If you want to come do a more kind of intensive type thing, I have that as well. But I'm looking forward to, I've been traveling for the last few years and working on other people's gardens, and I'm still doing that. But it'll be nice to have people here in the garden now that I finally have a garden. Yeah, have something for people to come visit and learn and see.
Are you thinking more curriculum-based classes or more tree-based classes where people bring their trees and that becomes the focus of those multi-day classes?
I have two different paths. So my tree based options are kind of more for local people, more kind of study
Mhm.
group kind of things, where people can come. Let's take this tree and set a goal for it, and then use the class to help get it towards that goal, whether it be the Pacific Bonsai Expo or local club show.
Yep.
And then I have, for people who are, wanting to study on another level, a more deeper level, I'm going to have a 2-day kind of intensive curriculum based class. And I'm calling that my deciduous concepts class. And that's going to be pretty fun. We'll dive deep into deciduous and the different options that come with that world.
I know you have some experience in participating in Michael's classes with this, but I'll be really curious what it looks like to have, if every tree in your garden is a collection piece, what it'll be like to have beginner students working on those collection pieces. I'll be really curious how that goes down.
Yeah, and not every tree in my garden is. I'll say, like I do have a lot of these Talperion trees, which are pretty rough still. I have a lot of trees that I maybe got from Brussels bonsai or somewhere where I have a nice trunk or a nice nabari or base or something like that. But we're building the rest off of that. So I do have a lot of younger trees. I think I'll always have some just because it's beneficial for students. But yeah, I think I don't know. I'm looking. I have a few trees that make it on Instagram every now and then, but I have a lot of things that don't make that cut, and those would be just as fun, if not more, for the students.
I have no bar whatsoever for what goes on Instagram. It's whatever I worked on this week that gets the
Yeah,
call. Oh
yeah,
man. But yeah, I think about that when I look at trees in the garden, especially as I've been kind of reducing my collection until I have a little more time for it. I keep thinking it's really hard for me to want to sell a tree that is such a perfect tree for learning on. I think that's the kind of tree you
yeah,
want to learn to wire. It has the right structure. That's the tree you want to learn to pluck. That's the tree you want to learn to carve. And that's what I always enjoyed about doing that kind of work as a hobbyist for so many years. And so and I really filled up my garden with a lot of those kinds of projects. And so it's funny, it's hard for me to let go of trees that just look like such perfect opportunities for learning.
yeah.
They're not
But
showstoppers at all, but they are just the
yeah,
kind of trees that people should be working with. They're
yeah,
fantastic. They'll be good trees in time. They just may
yeah.
not be the ones you enter in that regional show, for instance.
Yeah, you mentioned when I was at Michael's that I think the biggest thing I learned from watching Michael's and kind of participating, being an apprentice through his classes, was the consistency, the fact that the trees in his garden. Michael doesn't really sell trees very much. When you were in his garden 10 years ago and you go in his garden today, you're going to see the same batch of trees there. And so for people who come back, I think that consistency is really nice because it allows people to say, oh, I decandled that tree 2 years ago. Wow, it's, further along the process now, or maybe it has this issue and it's being revamped in a box or something like that. And so I like that consistency of classes when you're in a garden where the trees are changed out very, very frequently. You don't get that kind of foundation, and I don't know. You're always working on new things, and you never really see what the old things are that you've done.
Yeah, it's really interesting. In a lot of ways, professional gardens are like hobbyist gardens in that over the course of one's life, you get to kind of choose what your contribution or relationship with bonsai happens to be, whether you take one batch of trees and push that through time and you just try to be really happy with how the trees look on the latter half of that journey, or you, like you say, you travel all the time, you touch as many different trees as possible, and so you're lifting up everything a little bit, but you may not have it in the form of a portfolio like Michael does in his garden. And they're all great contributions, and I'm actually hoping we get more and more people that can make every one of those kinds of contributions. But it's a big choice that you have just now starting out in this direction and seeing all those options. You're like, nope, collection front and center right here, let's start moving
Yeah.
these guys along.
Yeah, and it's probably not the best business plan, but it's always been my personal goal was to focus on the collect. Ever since the Artisans Cup, really, that was
Neat.
the pivot for me because I've been to U.S. national shows and the bar there is a little different. Not that there aren't nice trees
Yeah.
there, but being around the Artisans Cup, it was here's the best quality that we can rope up,
Yep.
and that it was really special to be around a room like that, it made me think a lot. What would a collection of these trees look like? And that's what I want. That
Yeah.
became my goal since then.
Yeah, what's neat about the national show is it's several things at once, but a big part of it is look at the breadth of what we're growing in America. And that is such a great way to call attention to the diverse climates that people have trees growing in. And so
Yeah.
we get tropicals, we get temperate things, we get desert things, we get just such a fun mix. It really feels like a national event to me. And we're seeing the best quality across many different swaths of these different kinds of trees, where when you narrow the focus more to, like the cup did, to wow, based on the people that want to play, what's the best that we can do? What does that look like?
Mm,
And we've actually talked about that kind of thing a lot for the expo coming up this fall. Is, do we want it to be the absolute best trees possible, or do we want to ensure that there's some level of diversity of species and styles and sizes? And it's a really interesting, at least I find it a really interesting question. A lot of people come down, most people I've talked to are just adamant, no, only accept the best trees. I don't care if every single one is the exact same size, species, and style. And I think that's great, but I don't know that that'd be my favorite show. And so what's fun
yeah.
is we're actually leaving this to the jurors in this case, and we'll say pretty much, give us the show that you want to see. I would love it if there's diversity. I would love it if we have the highest possible quality available, but maybe balance that the way you personally as a juror would want to balance that. And I'm just curious to find out how that goes down.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really excited. I have it on my calendar for next month to start photographing some trees for submissions. So, uh,
I have it on my calendar to make a submission system that works.
great, great. Hopefully, we'll come up with something. But
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, we're getting
yeah,
actually pretty close. We've answered most of the questions about it's just down to nitpicky details.
yeah,
What specifically do we want to see in the photos? What size will they be? Just dumb stuff like that. But I
yeah.
think I think the basics are all in place now.
Yeah, other than my personal things that I have going on here in the garden with classes and collection and stuff like that, and working with clients, the expo is by far the big thing I'm looking forward to. I don't know. I think it's going to be really really special.
You
So
starting to get questions from people up your way?
yeah, and I'm starting to. I keep sharing it with people too because I want people to be there because it's whenever someone puts all this work into a bonsai show, it ends up being pretty special. And you know I don't know.
Oh,
I
good.
think I don't know. I think it's going to be a really great event. So I
We
want as many
just
people there as possible.
And it looks like we'll be able to accommodate that, which is very exciting. We recently came up with a draft of the floor plan for the event, and it looks like we'll be able to accommodate a lot of visitors. And I'm really, really excited about that.
What is so give us like a quick recap. I know we've talked about this in other episodes, but there's going to be about 70-ish trees. Is that right?
Yeah, it looks like 70, 75, somewhere in that neighborhood, 6 to 8 foot displays.
And then like a ton of vendor tables too, right?
Not a ton. It's a similar number. I think it's between 70 and 80 vendor tables right now.
Okay, that's so great.
Yeah.
And you think what about like 1,000 people at the event,
Yeah,
something like
I mean,
that?
in terms of what fits, it looks like we can have up to 1,000 people, and maybe even more than that within the event. So that
That's
just tells
awesome.
me that everything's open. Now we need to finalize that with the fire department apparently before we can move forward with those plans. But in terms of the calculations for how they come up with those numbers, it's looking really good right now. So knock on wood, we will. Where
Yeah,
the plan we have in place is, we're feeling really good about it.
great. Well, it's gonna be a fun year. 2022 I think is gonna be a special year for bonsai.
Yeah,
There's a lot happening with a lot of different people, and I think it's exciting to watch. The community keeps growing. It's not stopping, which is fun.
Yeah, and one way I think of 22 is how I think of 2021, and I feel a lot better about the health of my trees today than I probably did a year ago. I don't know that I had any specific concerns last year, but just when I look around the garden, I feel that I've had enough of the trees long enough now that enough of them are in good soil, enough of them, I kind of know where they are, what the path is. And even though we did not anywhere near have the weather we were hoping for this year. It was
Yeah.
one of the coolest springs and summers we ever. It was a mild fall, very cool spring and summer. So we just didn't get anywhere near the growth we wanted right in my exact microclimate. But overall, the health of the trees, it makes me feel great going into the new year. That's why I'm so anxious now. It's like, okay, get out in the garden, pick up a pair of tweezers and just start at one end,
Yeah.
finish at the other.
Yeah, and I think that's going to make the expo more special because the last couple of years of the pandemic, we've all been home. We've been working on our trees more. Our trees are getting better. Their health is getting better. Our collections are getting better. I think people are going to have a lot to share next year at the expo.
Yeah,
which
the
is gonna be
first
fun.
show in the Bay Area is coming up in 2 weeks, and people are very excited about it. I'm excited about it. So it's people are getting excited in that. What's funny is in terms of my own collection, in terms of what I have to show, I'm actually looking forward to our second show already, as silly as that sounds.
Yeah.
But because I've been so busy doing other things, and I know this year is going to be even more so that way, I am literally focused more on getting trees ready for our second show, assuming everything actually works and we all survive the
Yeah.
next year
Yeah.
to do this and have any desire to do it again. But in terms of where the trees are, that's what I'm getting really excited about, is actually
Yeah.
down the road. I'll whip up what I can for this year, but it'll feel a lot better to have more things on track, which
Yeah.
feeds into why I'm looking to reduce my collection so radically. Until all the trees are on that track, it just won't feel as good as when they are all going the right
Yeah.
way.
Well, I know you're going to make a lot of people happy because the demand for trees has never been higher than it is right now, and so uh, we need more good trees out there. So I'm sure the things that you're selling are going to be great homes for people.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
people have been really happy so far. I've been happy with every last bit of the process so far, so it's been really fun. But yeah,
Great.
that's the
Well,
main thing. If I can get through the year with a house, heat, trees, some bench
yeah.
space, and a show, boy, that'll be
Yeah.
more than my wildest dreams right now.
Yeah.
It all reads like a fantasy at this point.
Yeah, but it's going to happen. It'll be pretty fun. So
I remain
I'm looking
optimistic.
forward to it. Yeah. Yeah.
Good. Well,
Great.
thanks for taking the time to chat.
Yeah. Well, we'll see everybody next time.
All right, to everyone listening, we're recording this right at the end of the new year, so Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year. See you next year.
Bye-bye.
The music on today's podcast is brought to you by the fine folks at Blue Dot Sessions. Check them out at www.sessions.blue.